99% of these landlords are losing money. Now, when you picture a property investor, you might imagine a 60-year-old boomer who bought a house 30 years ago for 100 grand and now takes the rent and uses it for their next holiday. But you're about to find out the top 3 reasons why that's not always the case. And we're going to count down those top 3 reasons before revealing why Kiwis keep investing in property anyway. And throughout this video, I'm going to use Opes Plus to run the numbers on different properties and show you them. This is a free platform I created for you guys here on the channel, and you can use it too. The link is down in the description. Now, the third biggest reason why 99% of investors lose money is that they take out massive mortgages. You see, if you buy this house for 600K, you might think, okay, so you need a 120K deposit. So the investor takes out a $480,000 mortgage. But many property investors don't have a casual 120 grand lying around. So what do? Most investors borrow the deposit against their own home, which is what I call the no cash needed method. And when they do that, they borrow all of the money they need to then buy the house. But then you've got this massive mortgage and the rent might not be enough to cover the loan and all of the other costs you've got. So to just give you an example, let's say you borrowed 600K for this place. Your interest rate, let's call it just under 5%, which means that your mortgage could cost you $553 a week, and you might get $550 a week in rent. So your mortgage is already bigger than your rent, and then you've got other costs like rates or maintenance or insurance that you also need to pay. And because so many investors buy properties in this way, Velocity, where I got the data from, they look at all the properties and say, well, if you bought these with 100% debt, how many are cash flow positive? And in Auckland, that's just 1%, which means that for every 100 new landlords, 99 will lose money. But even bigger than that is reason number 2, which as a property investor, your income is the rent. And your rent is going to be pretty stable year to year. Like it might go up by $10 this year, maybe $20 next year, and it might average out to say a 4 to 5% increase per year. But your costs, those jump around wildly. So guess what mortgage interest rates were just 4 years ago? They were barely over 2%. 2 years later, they shot up to over 7%. And this is the part that most investors completely misunderstand. That increase in interest rates from like 2 to 7%, that's a 5% increase in the interest rate. But it's not a 5% increase in your costs. The amount of interest you'd have to pay to the bank, it didn't go up by 5%, it went up by over 200%. So some investors ended up paying almost $500 a week extra on their mortgages. Now that is like buying a brand new iPhone every single month and giving it to the bank, whereas your rent might have only gone up by, say, $30 a week. And that's why if you roll the clock back to early 2021 and ran the exact same numbers, it was literally the exact other way around. For every 100 new landlords in Auckland, 99 of them, the rent covered all the mortgage. Now, it's the exact opposite. And what changed were the interest rates. And even if you bought a house when interest rates were really low, that doesn't mean you bought it at the perfect time, and it doesn't mean that you escaped from those higher interest rates, because if you did what most people do and locked in your interest rate for 12 months, you still might have had to face those high interest rates a little later on when your interest rate came up for refix. And that's just because you marry the house, but you date the interest rate. And I learned the number 1 reason investors lose money using Opes Plus, because over 29,000 investors use this to analyze their properties, which means I get really good data on how much money property investors are really making. And after studying all the properties added in by almost 30,000 Kiwis, there is one factor that time and time again separates those who make money through their property versus the ones that are topping them up. Now, what could it be? It wasn't where the properties are, it's not the number of bedrooms or even the rental return. It's time. The longer you've owned a property for, the better your cash flow tends to be most of the time. And that makes sense because if you bought a property 30 years ago, you might have spent, call it 100K on the house. And even if you took out a 100K mortgage to buy it and never paid it off, today that mortgage, 100K, that feels really, really tiny. whereas the rent on your property might have gone from $150 a week to $500 a week. The mortgage stayed the same while everything else got more expensive, and that's why when you run the numbers on a property, typically you'll see the cash flow getting better the longer you hold on to it. But that leaves one very important question. If landlords are topping up their properties, why do they keep investing? Well, it comes down to three more reasons. And the first is, that's just the way it is. If you don't put any money in to buy a property, the stats show that the vast bulk of new landlords top up the property. That is the maths of it. Now, of course, not every property needs a top up, and if you get your hands dirty and renovate it, that improves the cash flow. But the stats show most first-time investors top up their properties. The second reason is that the cash flow improves over time. So even if you have to top up a property at the start, after a while, it'll probably start paying for itself. And I've seen this with my own properties. So I bought one in 2019, borrowed a lot of money to buy it, had to top it up for a while. Interest rates spiked, had to top it up even more. But now it's pretty much break even because the rent has gone up, but the mortgage now costs basically what it did when I bought it. But the third reason that landlords still invest is the big one, which is house prices tend to go up. Just 2 days ago, I interviewed an investor. His name's Sam. He came on the Property Academy podcast to share his story. He's an ex-dairy farmer, and he got talking to his boss in the milking shed about buying houses. So Sam's driving down the road, sees a property for sale, decides to buy it as an investment down in Canterbury. He owned it for a while and sold it 6 years later, but, and this is the important part, he sold it for $180K more than he bought it for. Now, $180,000 over 6 years, that averages out to 30 grand a year or $577 a week. And Sam was pretty chuffed. Now, if you had to put in $100 a week or $150 a week, but you get $577 a week out, well, maybe that's a deal worth doing. Now, you can argue about how much house prices will go up in the future and what will happen to interest rates next. Of course, you want to run the numbers on that specific property you're looking at investing in. And to be honest with you, some people just don't like the idea of topping up a rental property. They think it's dumb. But house prices and rents tend to go up, even as your biggest cost, your mortgage, gets paid down or stays the same. And even though a lot of investors have had to top up their properties at one time or another, investors who have played the long game in New Zealand have tended to do exceptionally well, even if they had to top up the property in the short term. So now you know the truth, but if you have to top up a property because of the mortgage, you better choose the right interest rate and set up that mortgage the right way. That's why in the next video, I'll walk you through everything you need to know about mortgages in New Zealand. Click here to watch it now.